Get started. We have people joining in. So Andrew, if you can turn your camera on, that'd be great.
You're unable to start video. Host is you have stopped it.
1 second. So yes, you are now hosting the shoot vehicle. All righty, here we go. Okay, first, it's great seeing you on video, and thank you for joining our fourth episode of Funding Stories. To everybody who's here, welcome to our fourth episode of Funding Story series, where funders of deep tech companies tell the story on how their startup got funded, both venture capital and non-dilutive funding from U.S. federal agencies. Funding Stories is hosted by Eagle Point Funding, world's premier in grant consultancy. And at Eagle Point, we help deep tech companies and startups who want to raise capital without losing equity to tap a $30 billion annual resource. In episode 4, and that's why I'm really happy. In this episode 4, I am super excited to have with us Andrew Preston, CFO of DeepNorth. DeepNorth is the AI analytics company. They use anonymized computer vision data to help stores build better customer experience and get actionable insights with brick and mortar stores. I'm particularly excited to speak with Andrew specifically today, as he acted as either the founder, CEO, and or CFO for 12 different companies and startups for the past 30 years, including consulting to many, many, many more. And I really hope Andrew can share his experience, both DeepNorth and funding in general. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
So without further ado, let's kind of get right to it. In our kind of part 1, let's start with you. You've been a founding CEO since pretty much 1982 when you founded Preston Gray. What made you open your own company?
Well, I graduated from the Stanford Business School, and we, at the time, it was the epicenter of the early personal computer days. Microsoft had just getting ready to go public. In fact, Steve Ballmer asked me to go work with him, but I decided I wanted to run my own company instead. And Apple had released the Apple II. The IBM PC had just come out, and so there was a lot of activity here. And I've always wanted to have my own company, so I started with that right out of business school.
So you've been kind of involved in various verticals, from accounting and smart vending machines to education software. How do you actually choose how to build a company? What's the right company to build? How do you choose which project? How do you even get started with that?
Well, a lot of it comes from relationships and or opportunities that come across. I get somebody pretty much every week calling me up wanting me to help or do something with them from a business perspective. So I prefer not to be pigeonholed into one vertical or one type of company. I've worked on a wide range of business models and companies, from consumer electronics, ebooks, before the iPad came out in the early 1999, 2000, vending machines, as you pointed out, consumer software, enterprise class software, educational software. I mean, it's been a wide range of technologies. I've not really been in the life science space, although I'm an advisor and an investor in a DNA company for horses and cows, and pigs. So again, it depends on the people that I'm working with, what the opportunity is. I'll often get a call from a venture capitalist and say, I got a problem here, and can you come in and help with it? Or I'll get a referral in from a VC that's an investor and wants to help build out the management team. So it'll be a function of the people, whether I like the people I'm working with, and the size of the opportunity, and whether it's an interesting business or not.
Are there any questions that you ask repeatedly before deciding what company you want to start or company you want to step in and help?
Um, well, I'm sure there are. I wouldn't probably remember what they all are, but conceptually, it's going to be getting a feel for the technology, the actual product or service, or the IP that's driving the business, and whether or not that feels right to me as far as the timing of it and the market opportunity. Clearly, looking at things that have large market opportunities is helpful. It then falls into the skill, the personality, and the background of the key founders that are involved with the business. Because if you got to work with somebody a whole lot, you might pretty much want to like working with them, or it's going to be drudgery. So those two things, and so the questions are all around that: who the investors are, whether I know them, and or whether they're funding the company adequately, or again, if funding is part of the task, then it's going to be what the probability of getting that done is from what you know, given the landscape of capital raising at the time.
Okay. And over the years, have you seen any repeated mistakes that you've seen in businesses that just keep coming up, or stuff that is a repeated kind of wrong thing that companies do?
I don't know that there's anything in particular that keeps flowing out that companies fail. What companies fail are primarily because the people. I've had a couple companies I've gotten involved with where, as well as I tried to vet the management team, the founders were problematic. They were either turned out to be pathological liars and or difficult or not mature enough to grow into the role of being the CEO. So that's sometimes often the biggest issue is the team or someone on the team not being able to scale into the opportunity and or grow into the role that they're growing to. I work with early stage startups, so most often the CEO or the founders it's the first time they've done that role. They've got a great product or idea, they've developed a prototype, or they're right at revenue ramp, and they need to scale. Your first task, or my first task, is to see if I can't scale with that founding team, because you don't want to get into the process of having to replace CEOs and founders, although I've done that a number of times. But the mistake is usually misjudging the personnel of the people capable of pulling off the task. The other thing that happens from a mistake perspective is you underestimate the market, or you don't really understand the revenue, the business model. How are you going to make money? I've had a couple times where we built a business based on the success of a couple customers, but it turns out that those customers were unique. There weren't as many of those similar type customers out there in the world that cared. They really liked the product, they loved it, they wanted it, but nobody else gave a shit. So you just couldn't sell more than two customers, because the rest of the world wasn't as enamored with the technology as the initial pilot customers were.
Have you ever taken a role in starting with a company and then pivoting them, or was that just a hard stop for a company?
No, I would say that pretty much every company that I've ever worked with, what you start with is not what you end up with. Part of the things you need to be able to do is evolve. Maybe it's not as drastic of a pivot. I've got one company I've worked with. Ron Conway brought me into it 11 years ago. It's the longest company I've been associated with pretty much ever. And it's now on its second pivot. So they're very tenacious in trying to get to something that works. And it's in some respects, it's an evolution of the product they started with, but the business approach was so drastic, I actually call it a pivot. But in most cases, you need to evolve the product, the service, the positioning, and often the pricing and or the business model of how you're going to generate revenue or value to your customers. It's different. It's going to, what you thought you were doing in day one is never what it looks like at the end of the trail, because the world is fluid, and you learn along the way, right? You think that's what the customers want, and then you find out they want something slightly different, or competition comes in and moves your your path a little bit one way or the other, or technology changes drastically. I mean, I had a company that we were doing DVDs in the early days before the internet. We were doing educational software on DVDs, Merriam-Webster dictionaries, and or discs on art and science and music, on math. And along comes the internet and wipes out that entire concept, right? Everything then moved to free content on the web. So, technology and will change how you have to evolve the business.
Okay. Thank you. If that's okay, I'd love to move to the DeepNorth. That's the company that, among others, you're currently acting as a CFO. For the people listening, can you tell what does DeepNorth do, and what's the biggest value you think it provides?
DeepNorth is an AI-driven machine learning video analytic platform. We take video feeds off of usually existing cameras, but sometimes we'll put a camera up there because there's not one in the right place. But most, if you go to any store, Home Depot, there's 200 cameras sitting in there all over the place. So we take that video content and analyze it. We focus on customer pathways, customer patterns. We're not doing facial recognition. We're not trying to identify people. It's not for security, but it's for, how many people have come into the store. If you're in a mall, how many people have walked by Tiffany's and didn't go in? How many people went in? How many people went in and bought? So you can get conversion data. What's the average age of the person coming in? Are they mostly young and or old, or male or female? In a larger store like a Home Depot, it might be the pathway through the store. A customer comes in, they're sitting in tools and they're dwelling. How long do they stay in that department? Did they buy something or pick something up in tools? Did an associate help them, or is there 25 people in the tools department and the associates are all in garden? Can you redeploy them to tools because that's where the customers are? What's the wait time at the registers? Do you need to open up another register? Or what's the abandonment rate? We're looking at analyzing objects, whether it's a human object or a car or airplane or some things, and looking at the interaction of that object through an environment. Our customers include large shopping malls, like Irvine Fashion Mall in Irvine, or IKEA malls in Europe, and large amusement parks like Disney, Walt Disney World, or SeaWorld in San Diego. Large retailers like Home Depot, Bed Bath & Beyond, and the like. Quick serve restaurants like McDonald's, Starbucks, Panera Bread. Warehouses and loading docks. Again, we're looking at moving the interaction of pallets and there are people moving. Delta Airlines is an investor. We look at what's going on with the airplane under the wing, we call it, at the ramp. Is the tug there? Is the person in the wrong place? Is the baggage cart there properly? What's the can we identify an employee going in an unsafe location? Again, depending on, because we're analyzing video and we're looking at those objects, and a person is an object just as much as a tug or an airplane or a car is an object, and they all have tracks and pathways. So we're giving an insight. If you look at a website, the web, you can tell, every click, every page, where they went, what they went through in the website, how long were they dwelling, what was the average time on the site. Those are all statistics that are very standard now. 20 years ago they weren't, but today that's normal. So we're doing virtually the same thing in the physical world. How long did someone spend in one department over the other? Did they actually go from the front door? Bed. We do a heat map of how they move through Bed Bath & Beyond. Where did they normally go by this one way? And so don't put the cheapest product in that pathway, put the most expensive or the product you want to push in that pathway. And the like. So we're giving people, our customers, our management insight as to what their customers are doing and or what their operations are doing. On a factory floor, pallets, how many pallets are moving from this loading dock to the next loading dock and what sequence. Or again, we're monitoring and managing objects, and we're moving and watching those objects move across a wide footprint. At a large shopping mall, there might be 250 cameras and you're moving over 1 million square feet. So we're watching, what entrance does somebody come in? What entrance do they leave at? How long were they, that object, that person at that facility? Did they walk by homes? What stores did they go into? What can you glean from the patterns of people on a Thursday afternoon when it's raining versus when it's not raining, or on a holiday? It helps people deal with traffic patterns in the mall, as well as, mall owner's job is to get footfall, to get people past the front door, your front door. Your job is to get them in the door and then store, but their job is to put people past it. So, Apple, they moved an Apple store to one end of the mall to the other, and then all the footfall around the old Apple store fell off dramatically. So they're trying to get rent from those people. They had to find a way to, once they saw that happen, they needed to find a way to build that foot traffic back up to justify the rent they were charging the merchants that were now not next to Apple anymore, that kind of thing.
So essentially all the information and insight a website could get naturally, you're able to convert that into offline and kind of real world people or stuff or objects to be able to give that insight to the store.
Yeah, we're working in the physical world as opposed to the electronic world. That's right.
So how did DeepNorth actually start? I'm assuming if we're walking the pivot path, how did the company actually start?
Our founder, Rohan Sunil, had done a couple other companies in the video space. This was 5 years ago. And he got a call from someone he knew at Walt Disney. And they said, can you come down and pitch us? We want to do the following things. He says, okay, well, come on. I'm sure. So he went down to Anaheim to see them, and because he knew the guy, and he goes, and he looked around, and they're, kind of like at the casting call were all these very large technology companies that were there with, billions of dollars of revenue and all the support capability that they had. And, 5 years ago, video analytics was not a well-known space, or wasn't a lot of competition or support in that. So he looked at it and said, sure, I can do that. But, why am I here? You've got, company A, B, C, and D here. They're like, they are big ass companies. And the guy says, well, they don't know what they're doing. You can do it. So they basically started the company because Disney wanted what Disney wanted, and Rohan could do it. And that evolved to the shopping malls down in Orange County and what they needed. And it evolved from there.
Okay. How do you deal with COVID? Physical locations, stores are closed, there's quarantine. How did DeepNorth cope the last year? Was there any adaptation or just hang on tight?
Well, when I was telling people where I was working a lot of my time on over the summer, I said, well, where are you working? Oh, DeepNorth. Well, what do they do? Well, our customers are airlines, restaurants, retail stores, amusement parks. They next question was, well, when did you file for bankruptcy? Those were the areas, if you look at those, that were the most hard hit from the pandemic. What we found in that, haven't lost any customers. We've been adding customers almost daily, but weekly. They all have stayed engaged in continuing to evolve the return on the ROI, the return on investments, the KPIs, the data that we're giving them. We're basically a data company, right? We analyze videos and give them information. And we slowed down in actual deployment. So we have, tens of less than 100 locations running when we could potentially have 10,000 locations running, because the stores are closed, the malls are closed. If Disney's not open yet, there's lots of things that are going on there. The malls are open and doing okay, and we're making momentum there. Home Depot's open, they're doing pretty well. But again, even with the Home Depot, they're doing okay. But COVID protocols were such in most of these retailers that no new vendors, no new activity, just minimal, only essential personnel to keep the doors open was what was provided. They wanted to shut down any kind of a, exposure and or new things going on. In most retail operations, you kind of shut down from Halloween through Christmas. You pretty much don't put anything new in a retail location because they're locked down for Christmas. You don't insert new opportunity, new technology into a store when they're at their busy season. So that was the same protocol that existed pretty much all of 2020. Now that's beginning to change. Things are opening up. We're now deploying into Europe much more actively, and as well as in North America, and in Asia, and pretty much everywhere in the world. But so we stalled our revenue growth, but we built up our backlog. And now that is starting to open up, and we hit it, we thought we were coming out of it in October and November, and then Thanksgiving and Christmas crush hit the world hard, and we went through this large lockdown everybody knows about. So that's now come back out. Numbers are falling off drastically in the last 10 days, 2 weeks, and things are starting to open up worldwide. I mean, UK was shut down really hard. California has been shut down really hard. And Florida's been pretty much open, but that's, it's an aberration on a worldwide basis. So that's starting to change. So, we hunker down was the right word, but continue to evolve the technology and the footprint and build the customer backlog. We're getting a tremendous interest worldwide. For a little company that's a startup, we've got a worldwide footprint.
Okay. So now let's go into more funding related. Let's talk about actual funding. Based on Crunchbase, DeepNorth has $33 million in funding. How did the company get its first round, and how long did it take to get their Series A?
Well, it's actually 25 million. I don't know where Crunchbase gets the other number. If you find the other $8 million, let me know. I could use it. Well, we're in the process of doing another round, which that would move it probably closer to 35, but not yet. The company is somewhat unique, and I've had a couple of companies in the last 10 years or so I've worked with her like this. We don't have a venture capitalist in the deal. There is no round. The initial $13 million was done through angel investors, friends, and family, advisors who understood it, and knew the founder and knew where the technology was going. A wide range, probably 30 or 40 investors in that range. And then Series A was a corporate partner round done in about a year ago, fourth quarter 2019, led by Home Depot and Delta Airlines. The technical lead investor is actually a family office, a private equity type oriented family office out of the UK. Doesn't really know, VC, not really VCs or think like VCs. Again, because of the customer relationships, customers were using it and wanting it. So we're now doing another round of Series A1, maybe B, depending on size. Again, led by corporate partners, customers and or partners who really see the value of the technology and want to be part of it. We have a couple venture firms in there, but it's not been a traditional venture capital raise.
It almost sounds like you have a preference towards private equity and not working with VCs.
Well, it's not really private equity, family offices and small angels. I would very much at this stage, we're talking to a couple of VCs about coming in, because at this point, relative to the ramp and the worldwide deployment and a potential liquidity event at some point, having a quality venture capital firm in there would be helpful. We're kind of in between. We're too big for the early stage investors, and we're too small for the Series B expansion investors. So, so we're kind of don't fit the herd mentality of the venture capitalists. Again, we don't know venture capitalists. We have people that have a venture capital in their name, but it's not, it's not Draper Fisher or Matrix or Sierra or Kleiner Perkins. It's, there's smaller funds. I've got over 40 years of doing this. I've got contacts in that space. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things that happened with COVID is that we reduced our ability to deploy. So our ARR, our revenue ramp, our deployment rate is unnaturally low because we were frozen for the last 12 months. Mm-hmm. The backlog, the potential is really big. I mean, it's hundreds of millions. But so the classic VC is, well, when after you deploy the next $10 million, come back and talk to me. But the problem with that is by the time we do that, we don't need you anymore. So it's kind of a chicken and the egg. It's an interesting dichotomy dealing with some of the VCs. It's like I said, I've been working with them for a long time.
Okay. Are there any takeaways you've had from the initial raising of DeepNorth? What was the biggest challenge?
Well, I wasn't there. I've only been here about a year, 15 months. So the initial raising was done, 4 years ago. But I've gone through early stage companies and the like. So the biggest issue, which is no different from DeepNorth than any other early stage company, is you're investing in the people and you're investing in the potential opportunity of the technology. And how can you get people to take that leap of faith that the team knows what they're doing and that the thing works and that customers will want it. I mean, or when you're very early on, you can't really validate any of those 3 pillars that you need to kind of traverse. So you're looking, and that's why we've had a very strong influence of advisors and customers involved in the funding process because they want it, they see it, they use it, they're it's like Mikey likes it, right? The old commercial. Delta looked at it and said, well, we need this, here's some money, go make it for us. And same thing with Home Depot.
So let's try and move from dilutive to non-dilutive and federal R&D grants. Obviously, DeepNorth has won R&D grants. Eagle Point has helped. Can I ask, when did U.S. federal funding become a part of the strategy, or how did it become an interest for you?
Well, I brought you guys on board to do this. I've seen this exposure before, and I can't remember where I first got introduced to Eagle Point, but I've got you in 2 of my companies right now. We did not approach this as a non-dilutive funding goal because the amount of money we're talking about in these phase 1 and phase 2 projects and the SBIR programs is not material enough to move the needle. We're raising millions of dollars in the government fundings and hundreds of thousands. And it's not funding in like, here's money to go pay the rent. Here's money to go, you need to hire people. You see, there's a cost. So it's not like a blank check where you're going to have fungible dollars to go spend where you need them. You're using that money to actually support the contract. We looked at the federal government work through you, and what we look at it is a way to have if we can match the technology needs of a federal grant to the development needs we have for our commercial product, and we can leverage that development, effectively have the government subsidize the engineering work that we otherwise would have to do anyway to evolve our commercial product, and at the same time open up a market and a product and a revenue channel for the government piece of it, then that's a win-win for us. I've done work with InQtel and a couple different companies and funding things over there. And that looks a little bit more like, here's some money, but your product fits the government. So here's some money to go develop it, and let's go take you in and be the purchase order customer success part of it to take you into the 3-letter agencies. That's not what we do here with Eagle Point, and we look at it very powerfully as a leverage to our IT for our engineering needs for the products and services we have. There'll be announcing this, so the project we won was Homeland Security for assisting in TSA checkpoints and using video analytics. That technology for them at the checkpoints is almost identical to what we need to do and are doing for self-service checkout at a grocery store at a Home Depot. We're looking at people coming into a checkout line, taking things into a conveyor belt, or looking and taking things out of a shopping bag and putting it into the scanner. You're taking stuff out of your suitcase and putting it on a beltway to go through security. There's very similar actions and activities that are going in the identification of the products or the objects that you're looking at. So that was a good win for us because if it works for TSA, it's a very powerful tool for them on a very broad deployment. And beyond TSA, it has applications worldwide for the same thing. And the technology, the engineering piece of it is consistent to what we have to do for a commercial application.
So you used whatever R&D needs and development you wanted for the private sector, and then found the opportunity that aligns within the government, and then see what more.
And that was the first task I assigned to the team to do this. The other side of that is also if we can find a opportunity within the government that has a use case that we already have, which is what a couple of things we've also been looking at bidding on for especially in the Air Force. Then that's a second application case where we're not really developing as much as customizing, if you will, or form fitting it into the application that the government has. But it's a chicken and egg routine. Which part of where are you in that flow? But both of those are things we're going after. So we're using it as a sales channel, if you will, as an entry point for a sale. I've got another company who I work with where their approach to government selling is, they've hired a former senator and they use him as a lobbyist and he brings the stuff into them. There's no wrong or right answer. They're all different.
Yeah.
They're all different ways to get to the same end goal.
How do people, investor clients, how does the private sector respond to DeepNorth or any other company having a government program or contract or R&D project?
Well, we find it being very positive. And the TS Homeland Security is supposed to be doing a press release in March for this. I got the contract, just kind of came across my desk yesterday, so I've got to look at it one more time and sign it. We look at it as a very positive because it's sort of a validation of your technology. The experience that I have, 30 years in working in government spaces is that they're much more sophisticated buyers than you think they are. The joke on the street is, the $5,000 hammer, right? The golden toilet seat from the old days of the space program. They're not frivolous buyers. They buy very competitively on price and quantity if it's an existing product, and they're very careful in searching for technologies that have a potential to fit. Now they have an opportunity and a goal to broaden that, so you're not just dealing with Accenture or the other large system, the Lockheed Martins of the world, the big government contractors. And they're opening things up and trying to make sure that smaller organizations and companies have an opportunity to show what they have to offer so that it's not just a big boy game. But they're still very frugal, and not frugal as much as very specific to be sure that what the hell you're doing. So if you can get through that, the one thing we just wondered, where they wouldn't tell us, but there were a lot of people that were competing for that particular opportunity. So the fact that you got chosen is a milestone in and of itself, because you can get some comfort that the technology and the team, because it's a combination of both, are world class, because otherwise they would not have entered into the contract.
Okay. What can you describe a little bit how was the process getting started? What was like also working with Eagle Point, but the process of starting from scratch and also starting to crank out projects and submitting for them?
The other company I brought you into is not doing well with this, because in order to make this work, you have to identify, you need a buy-in at the highest levels. So the CEO and myself and the two VP of engineering, we have two in this case as opposed to the CTO, we're on every Wednesday call with the team. And we're committed to making this process work. If you don't have, and we assigned, it's been a series of people because we're evolving to the right fit, but we assigned, regardless, you have to put somebody on it that lives and dies by that success. If it's otherwise, it's a nuisance to the engineering teams and because it's, it takes time and energy and focus. You got to do it. You can't just, dial it in. So if you don't put that level of approach and commitment to it, it will probably fail. It's not like fill out a bunch of forms and see what sticks, right? You really got to do a job. And the way we wanted, I believe, in the one we have won so far, and we have a couple more that are pending. We lost one and we got two are pending. So and it's a numbers game to a large extent. It was because the work that went into that proposal, the technology fit, the people fit, but that proposal and the pitch that they did the team did was outstanding. It was really well done. And that again was part of the calculus that the contracting team at the government brought into their decision process. Well, these guys do good work. They cared. And so it all goes into that. So the takeaway is, if you're going to do it, you just don't write a check and give it to Eagle Point, and then 3 months later you get a deal. You got to go and do the work.
It has to be taken seriously at the top level management. It can't be just a side hustle.
That's right. And it doesn't need to mean that the CEO has to do the work. It means that everyone knows that it's an important element. And whoever you have to assign someone to it that knows what the hell they're doing and is at high enough capability levels. Don't give it to the office manager to fill in some forms, right? It's not, I had to fill out a form to get to the right website sign up. But other than that, I don't know, I'm the CFO. I'm not the technology person. You have to give the right content owner, the right engineering, the right IP source. The skill set has to be there at the highest levels to make it work.
Yeah. So after winning, and hopefully you'll get started really soon, what are the next steps? How are you planning the non-dilutive route, the government route, for the next year?
Well, we continue to apply for other opportunities that make sense, that fit those two criteria I laid out earlier. And we'll continue to do that. And then we assign the right project team and manage that project team, much like we would manage a project team if we're sitting and putting in new solutions to Delta Airlines, or any of our customers. It becomes a project-driven managed customer. And the opportunity is not what we got from the first grant or the first phase one payment. The opportunity is deployment, right? We're not doing this just for our health. So so you have to kind of do it and put what you need to get on, because it's a multi-million-dollar opportunity, right? It could be, actually haven't even bothered trying to calculate how big it could be, because we don't know yet. But I mean, it's I can tell you it's probably, $5, 10, 15, $20 million contract at scale. So it's, but right now it's, baby steps, right? We won the bid. Now now the Safimoth is calling to go find the contract and sign it. And then we're going to get the team launch it. And then we'll put it's an 8-month, 6 or 8, I think it's an 8-month project. So, between now and the end of the year, we've got to make it work.
Yeah. Are there companies that you tell them maybe you shouldn't go after federal funding, or is this a step that you'd recommend for tech companies to pursue as a long-term strategy?
It all depends on the product and the stage of the company. I mean, if would I have suggested that DeepNorth do this 4 years ago? Probably not, because they needed to focus on what they needed to do to evolve the core technology and the customer base that's there. So I think it's hard to say because it's going to be very specific to the customer and the technology. If it's, you're not just selling commodities, right? We're not like trying to get on the GSA schedule to sell light bulbs, which I've done before. You're trying to create there needs to be both the technology, it has to be far enough along so that you can give them comfort that you can get there. It's not a research project. It's a customization or an evolution of what you've already done. So, you need to be far enough along to have something you've done. Having customers and proving it in the commercial space is, I think, a criteria for the contracting teams to get comfort that you can now apply that, what you've learned and proven works, to their application.
Okay. But before we kind of wrap up, and thank you very much for kind of being generous with your time, any final words to companies or owners, people who are listening, that they should know right now, the market's being opening, or specifically about funding or non-dilutive funding?
Well, I think as we've evolved over the last 20, 30, 40 years and where capital comes from, there are plenty of alternatives to trying to raise what you need for your business. There's venture debt, and the classic Silicon Valley Bank venture debt kind of routines, which are pretty much non-dilutive. There are things like we're talking about here with the government grants and or fundings for that. And again, in the life science space, they do a lot of grant writing. It's their, and there's a whole other Eagle Point division, I think, that does life science work because of that. There's now crowdfunding capabilities for finding certain sources. There's going into corporate partners as opposed to just straight VCs. You got to start where you can find the money and build on your success, but there's no one size fits all. 20 years ago, it was you drove up on, you got enough, you had a cocktail napkin, you wrote some outline of what you were doing on it, you got a team together, you drove up the Sand Hill Road and you pitched somebody and they gave you the seed money to go start the business. It kind of doesn't work that way anymore. So you've got to be creative and open to all kind of different paths and types of people that get there. And as with everything else, it's a relationship. Early on, the investors investing in the people and this founder or the founders more than anything else, because 9 times out of 10, those early investors have no clue technically what you're doing. They're not sophisticated. They don't have an idea what it is. They just are trusting you to do what you can do. And from there, you have, then as you move up the sophistication level of the investor, it gets a little more complicated to prove your point.
Okay. What's a way for people to reach you if they have any questions or interest for DeepNorth or want to contact you directly?
Andrew.preston@deepnorth.com.
Okay. Andrew, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it. We monopolized your time for almost the past hour, but I really appreciate you coming up. Folks, thank you for joining as well. We'll be posting the interview afterwards with a link, so stay tuned. Andrew, thanks again so much. And thank you for joining, and thank you everybody who's been viewing.
All right, bye-bye.